Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to what happened to the giant hovercraft, and this was suggested to me through Patreon. Someone on the Patreon actually suggested it, and I was asking before about hovercrafts and stuff, and yeah, they came to suggest this video, and yeah, I'm interested. So I don't know anything about hovercrafts, to be honest. Probably the least known thing to me. Are they still in use? I mean, they are in some sort of degree, but I don't know what they're really good for, because I just don't know how they can be any more useful than, I don't know, a boat. But I guess one of the conclusions is they can go on land, but I don't actually know if that's true, if that's like a myth. We're going to see, but hopefully going to enjoy. If you want to see some more of my reactions, like I said, the Patreon's in the description where there's many other reactions. I've just reacted to Black Hawk Down, the first part of the actual film, and yeah, I'm planning to do other film reactions, and I've done film reactions from the past stuff and just many other reactions. If you want to see stuff or suggest me some things that I can't post to YouTube, links are in the description for that. But let's jump into this and see what happened to the giant hovercraft.
This video was made possible by CuriosityStream. Watch thousands of high-quality documentaries and get access to my streaming service Nebula using the link in the description. 50 years ago, giant hovercraft were the pride of Britain. They were a new kind of machine that could go almost anywhere, on land, water, or just about any other surface. And they were fast, capable of reaching 130 kilometers an hour.
What, on the water?
Largest could transport 60 cars and as many passengers as a jumbo jet.
This seems good. This seems like it's a really good thing. It's quick. Can go on land. Obviously, I don't know if you'd want to go on land if you're using it for this situation, and I guess this is a non-military hovercraft. But why wasn't this continued to be used? This seems like it's a good alternative to boats.
These giants once promised to revolutionize the way we travel, but today they've all but disappeared. To understand what made hovercraft so revolutionary, consider that they're not like any other vehicle. In fact, they share more in common with aircraft than boats.
What?
That's because hovercraft are essentially airborne. They work using the principles of lift and thrust. To lift off and hover, fans trap a cushion of air, while propellers generate thrust to move forward. And what it all means is that friction and water resistance are significantly reduced, allowing a hovercraft to hit speeds well beyond that of any ship. But speed isn't the only advantage, because no other vehicle can match a hovercraft's versatility. Out at sea, in shallow water, on ice, or in a swamp, they can go where no other vehicle can. Where there's no harbor, a hovercraft can simply crawl out of the water, where a ship would run aground. Hovercraft were a brilliant innovation, and in the 1960s, a hover transport revolution seemed just over the horizon. When the first hovercraft debuted in the summer of 1959, it stunned the world, as it appeared to almost magically float over any...
Wait, it's literally levitating. What? I still thought they touched the ground. What the hell?
Surface. Its designer, a brilliant British engineer named Christopher Cockerell.
In 1959, I didn't even know that was really possible until a lot more recent than that. 1959, they were able to make things obviously not levitate, but look like they're levitating in that sort of way.
Wasn't the first to dream up the idea of a hovercraft. But modern hovercraft wouldn't be possible without Cockerell's key innovation called the momentum curtain. Earlier attempts at building hovercraft involved blowing air into an open hull, which didn't work very well and required a lot of power. Cockerell's innovation was to direct a ring of air towards the outer edges of the hull, trapping high-pressure air, which allowed the craft to hover much higher off the ground. In 1959, Cockerell and two others piloted the first practical hovercraft all the way across the English Channel.
Damn.
But it would take another key innovation to truly unlock the hovercraft's potential. In 1961, another British engineer proposed fitting the craft with a flexible skirt, which would allow it to hover much higher off the ground to better handle uneven surfaces. With the flexible skirt, hovercraft could become much more versatile machines. and it sent British aircraft builders racing to develop their own designs. Almost overnight, the first small-scale hovercraft transport services began popping up throughout Britain.
Oh, wow.
In just a few short years, hovercraft would go from small prototypes to enormous craft that could carry hundreds of passengers. By the mid-1960s, a hovercraft craze had swept the world, and countries like the United States and France poured millions into their development. But the British were at the forefront, and the leading company in the world was Saunders Roe. They had not only built Cockerell's original prototype, but also a series of civilian and military designs. And in 1963, Saunders Roe set out to build a new kind of hovercraft, one that would be 4 times larger than any previous design and built to compete against conventional ferries. On the English Channel, a ferry needed about an hour and a half to make a crossing. A hovercraft would cut the trip down to just half an hour.
See, this is what confuses me, because even now it is ferries. Hovercrafts, again, from what I'm seeing, it only seems like it's got positives on compared to the ferries, other than maybe size, because ferries are massive. But in every other way, the hovercraft seems like it would be a lot more beneficial for travel. But even to this day, whenever you go from usually Dover to Calais, it's only ferry. I mean, obviously, because I guess hovercrafts aren't used like that nowadays, but
allowing for twice as many daily crossings. The new giant would be designated as the SRN-4, and it would operate more like an airliner, with a crew that would include a captain, flight engineer, and navigator, along with a deck and cabin crew of 11. In standard configuration, it would carry 30 cars and 254 passengers, or it could be configured for 609 passengers. No one had ever attempted to build a hovercraft this large. The engineering and economic risks were enormous.
Wait, was that sped up?
Enormous.
Okay, it was very sped up, but still, that's crazy how it just goes up like that.
The world's largest hovercraft debuted in the summer of 1968, with service connecting Britain and France on the English Channel. On board, high-profile guests included Princess Margaret and Christopher Cockerell himself. Passengers marveled at the all-British achievement as the 165-ton machine built up speed. But what no one yet realized was that the SRN-4's rubber skirt was literally tearing apart beneath them.
Oh.
Attachments designed to contour waves were damaged or torn right off by rough seas, sending repair crews scrambling to replace them after almost every trip. And just 3 days into service, a large wave damaged the craft, putting it out of commission for nearly a week. And it was really just the start of problems. Crossings were regularly canceled due to mechanical issues like hydraulic and gearbox failures. But an even bigger issue was the weather. The SRN-4 was rated for waves of just 2.5 meters. And on the English Channel, it didn't take much to stir up those kind of conditions. In its first 3 months of service, more than a third of scheduled trips were canceled. The debut hadn't gone well, and in October of 1968, the SRN-4 was pulled from service altogether to undergo extensive modifications. Unreliable and seemingly unsuitable for open water travel, the future of large passenger hovercraft was in doubt.
But the thing is, like, with engineering and stuff, you usually like have these problems to start with, and then you slowly are able to adapt it and change it to the point where it can withstand all that stuff. So I don't know what happened next. I'm assuming they just ended up stopped doing it and just they just ended up stopping. They just stopped doing it. But if they kept doing it and like had made these changes and slowly made it to the point where it could withstand these things, maybe it would have ended up working. But I guess that was too much money in these times. I'm not too sure.
Next time, cross the channel the streamlined way. It's fast. It's got style.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a beautiful day. We'll be traveling at 60 miles an hour, and we're expecting to cross in just 35 minutes.
Despite the disastrous debut, cross-channel hovercraft proved to be incredibly popular with the traveling public. And by the time the SRN-4 was put back into service,
Okay.
many of the earlier issues had been solved, and the skirt had been redesigned to better withstand waves.
Okay then.
By the mid-1970s, there were 2 carriers operating iconic hovercraft on the English Channel. And they could barely keep up with demand, with trips fully booked weeks out in advance. But there was still a problem. Neither carrier was actually making money, because the SRN-4 burned 1,000 gallons of aviation-grade fuel every hour, and maintenance costs were astronomical compared to conventional diesel ferries. To offset high operating costs, both carriers had to modify their hovercraft to increase passenger and vehicle capacity by widening and lengthening their hulls. By 1978, the largest hovercraft could carry 418 passengers and 60 cars.
Even bigger.
The increased capacity helped make giant hovercraft more competitive, and by the end of the decade, hovercraft were carrying nearly a third of cross-channel passenger traffic. But as the 1980s approached, large civilian hovercraft would face a challenge that no engineer could solve. If iconic hovercraft were in operation today, they'd still be the fastest way to cross the English Channel.
Yeah.
Faster than conventional diesel ferries or high-speed catamarans introduced in 1991, faster than even the Channel Tunnel, which opened in '94.
Wow.
But it wouldn't have mattered. The hovercraft as a form of transport really was doomed from the start. In the early 1960s, they had captivated the public's imagination with their incredible speed. But that speed came at the cost of just about everything else. Compared to conventional ferries, hovercraft were less reliable, less efficient, less capable in rough weather, and less comfortable. And it meant that by the end of the 1960s, excitement over hovercraft had largely worn off, and Britain's once booming hovercraft industry fell into recession. To make matters worse, fuel prices skyrocketed in the 1970s, putting a final nail in the coffin, ensuring that fuel-thirsty hovercraft could never be widely adopted as transport. And it meant that the enormous SRN-4s would represent the pinnacle of passenger hovercraft design. But in the 1980s, they would face increasingly stiff competition from conventional ferries, which had wide enough profit margins to continually lower fares and win back customers.
Okay.
Giant hovercraft could no longer compete, especially after the Channel Tunnel opened in 1994. But no other vehicle can match a hovercraft's versatility, which is why these awesome machines remain relevant today with the world's militaries, industry, and rescue services, even as the iconic SRN-4s were entirely phased out by the year 2000. But many argue that hover technology never reached its full potential, and in the 1960s, Cockerell and British engineers had a much bigger vision for a new form of transport that would hover on a cushion of air and reach speeds of 500 kilometers an hour.
What is that?
They were called tracked hovercraft, and they would have been faster than any train in the world, even today. By 1972, engineers had developed the necessary technologies and even constructed a test track and prototype train.
What the
They
hell?
were seemingly on the cusp of reinventing railways, but their efforts have almost entirely been forgotten. You can learn more about the incredible story of the tracked hovercraft in my latest video.
Damn it, I was excited to see this, but got to shout out the ad, fair enough. But what happened to the giant hovercraft? Well, that's a little look into a vehicle that I find so fascinating because it's just so different to anything else. But yeah, the more you know, right? Is there attack hovercrafts? Don't know why it's all capitals. Or is it just for carrying things? Used by Japanese Navy and Maritime Self-Defense Force. They transport weapons systems, equipment, cargo and personnel from ship to shore across the beach. So just expensive and noisy. So there was a lot of potential, but I guess it just wasn't meant to be in that time. But who knows? Maybe in the future they'll find a way to make them better in certain ways. I don't know. But hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. And yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.